Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel, or if it's your first time, welcome especially. I'm Sally, and today we are going to be diving into the perfect topic for you to start with, diving into the question of what is pro-metabolic, how does it apply to you, and I'm going to give you some really tangible steps at the end of this video as to how you can get started. Before we hop into it though, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're interested in seeing more content like this, give this video a thumbs up. And don't hesitate to leave a comment just letting me know what kind of videos you do like, don't like, what you want to see next, and so on. But let's hop right into our question, what is pro-metabolic? Now, I think to answer this, it is helpful to first talk about what it is not. Pro-metabolic is not a diet, not in the sense of a list of parameters on what you can eat and what you can't eat. Rather, pro-metabolic lifestyle, we'll say, has a focus on abundance as opposed to depravity, and on supporting our bodies in such a way that we are able to eat a whole bunch of different foods and handle them well. So we'll get into more and more logistics as we talk, but stress is a big thing that we're gonna think about when it comes to a pro-metabolic lifestyle. When we say pro-metabolic, that very directly means eating in such a way, living in such a way that supports your metabolism. Stress has a tremendous effect on this. So when we are applying these principles, we're thinking about number one, eating in such a way that is going to minimize our digestive stress, living in such a way that is going to minimize the stress put on us within reason. And then number two, eating and living in such a way that is going to enhance our body's ability to handle and respond to the stressful situations that we do encounter. Because let's just be realistic, we're all going to run into stress. It's not always a bad thing, but if we're not able to support ourselves through it, we just end up running ourselves into the ground. When it comes to even more specific kind of principles behind the pro-metabolic lifestyle, there are two things that I tend to think about being the core behind it. Number one is going to be blood sugar balance, and number two, is going to be bioavailability. In terms of blood sugar balance, this applies or relates to stress, because when our blood sugar isn't balanced, if we go too long between eating, if we're just eating carbohydrates, not protein with it, or vice versa, generally we're going to see a stress response. And this is an oversimplification, so please bear with me. But generally speaking, when our blood sugar drops too low, to kind of make up for that, we're going to see a spike in cortisol. That's the one side of things. When we're talking about bioavailability, this applies to both our macronutrients and our micronutrients. So we could break this all down in another video, but when we're talking about macronutrients, there's carbs, protein, and fat, and there are forms of these nutrients that our bodies are better able to digest than others. For instance, we are able to more readily absorb the protein and the amino acids, usually in animal proteins, than we are from those in plants. And then number two, when it comes to a lot of the micronutrients, we will say, that are in our diets, either getting it from animal sources or getting it from kind of cooked plant sources is generally going to be easier for our body to handle than eating an abundance of raw vegetables all the time. Again, I just want to emphasize that's an oversimplification. This is a little bit rambling. I'm just trying to kind of express these thoughts the best I can. So take that with a grain of salt for the time being. But again, it's just that focus on eating things that we're actually going to be able to absorb the nutrients from. And then those nutrients are going to help us when we run into stress, which we inevitably will. So now we know that a pro-metabolic lifestyle is meant to live in such a way that's going to support your metabolism. Accordingly, this is going to support your thyroid, and accordingly, again, this is going to support your hormones, which are the body's messengers and which have an effect on just about every single bodily system. Stress is a big contributor to our metabolic health, And more specifically, when we're thinking about this way of eating, this way of living, we're thinking about minimizing stress where we can and supporting our body's ability to respond to stress when it does come up. So let's talk now about signs that our metabolisms could use a little bit of help. And to be honest, from what I've seen, most people fall in this boat. We live in a world of diet culture, in a world of over complication of what it means to eat a healthy and wholesome diet. And I know for myself, I didn't even realize that things were off until I really started diving kind of into this world. So the first sign, which might be the most common, is going to be really cold, like hands and feet. This is something I've dealt with for years. I've never really thought much of it, but I have always kind of just understood that I don't do the best at regulating temperature, particularly through my hands and feet, which suggests my circulation isn't the best. But also as a whole, I tend to either get really cold or I'm too hot. Like there's not a happy medium unless it's literally like 72 degrees and perfect outside. Other signs are going to be poor sleep, low body temps as a whole. If any of you are taking your body temperature or your basal body temperature upon waking, I hear a lot of people say that if it's below 97.5 pre-ovulation, that is a sign that your metabolism could use some help. Although I've heard different figures on that, I do think that there is an extent to which this is just going to depend. Again, we could probably get into that in another video, but for now, I will just leave it with kind of a broad lower body temperatures, especially upon waking. Poor sleep, I may have already said that. And then a lack of appetite upon waking. This is something that I see a lot as people think, oh, I'm in great health, I'm not hungry when I wake up, I'm just gonna skip breakfast. Usually what's going on there is your stress hormones are already high. It's kind of interfering with your appetite. And one of the first things that we're gonna look for when it comes to improving our metabolic health is kind of achieving an appetite upon waking, and more on that in a little bit. But for some other signs, and this is not comprehensive, we're looking at just low energy as a whole, maybe an afternoon crash, fertility issues, and irregular cycles or really painful cycles. Believe it or not, your period does not have to be absolutely miserable every month. And full transparency, I'm still on a journey of just improving the health kind of my cycle, but what I have noticed is since I have adopted this way of eating, my periods have been much more consistent. They've always been pretty regular in terms of like when they come in the month, but it's like to the day now. They tend to be shorter than they were and just very consistent in terms of how long they last and what, you know, logistically it looks like, and definitely less painful as a whole. So now that we've talked about what pro-metabolic is, how it might apply to you, or you know, kind of questioning whether or not your metabolism needs help, let's dive into how we can get started. And this is where we're going to get into some more specific principles, but I really encourage you to look at these again as ways that you can help support your body as opposed to rules that we need to follow to stay on a quote-unquote diet. So the first one's going to be eat upon first waking. Ladies especially, but I would say everyone, bearing in mind that I am not a dietitian, we really need to let go of this idea of intermittent fasting. You're fasting when you sleep. And especially with the female body, when it comes to our stress response, we simply cannot handle in the long term going hours after we're waking up without eating. I could rant for hours about this and even the research that goes into intermittent fasting and how none of that was really done on women. I'm just gonna leave it at that though. When we wake up, we need to break our fast. As we talked about kind of under the last point, something that you're often going to see as a sign of a sluggish metabolism or of just needing help with your metabolism in general is that you're not going to be hungry upon first waking. Do not look at this as a badge of honor. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with you, like you're all good, but we should be working towards being hungry and then eating within the first 30 minutes to 1 hour of waking. A piece of advice I have for you if you find that you're not hungry, something that really helped me is to make some little like gummies. I have a few recipes throughout my channel. I can link one right here. Or just make something really simple that you can easily get into your body during your first 30 minutes of being up. That's going to kind of jumpstart your digestion, and most likely you'll find that a little bit after consuming something small, you'll be ready for a bigger meal. And this isn't one of my official points, but I'm going to just throw it in here, is we need to stop waking up and then working out fasted, because our body is not going to have its preferred energy source at that time. We're going to be causing a cortisol spike and hurting ourselves in the long run, for lack of better words, when it comes to our stress response. So eat upon first waking. And another one that was hard for me and going to be hard for a lot of us is no coffee on an empty stomach. So coffee is another one of those things that is a really big metabolic stimulant, and that can be a great thing, but if we are ingesting especially black coffee on an empty stomach, we're going to see that cortisol spike, and that's what causes the jitters, and that may contribute to a crash later in the afternoon. But even if you're not seeing that, it's burning through your mineral stores, and it's often going to have kind of an effect down the road in the long run as it just wears on your metabolic and hormone health. So something I love to do for that is I'll just have at least a small breakfast. Some of those gummies I talked about, sometimes I'll have some like goat's milk cheese, I'll have some fruit of some variety, I'll eat that, and then I'll sip on my coffee. And I almost always add to my coffee some sort of like cream or milk. I really love just a splash of heavy cream if I don't make a regular latte. I always add some collagen. That's helping you get some protein in just to start off the morning. And I will add sometimes some sort of sugar, but I really don't like sweet coffee, so I just make sure to have sugar on the side, fruit on the side or something like that. It doesn't have to be straight sugar, but the idea is that we're not having coffee on a black stomach or on an empty stomach, and then when we do consume coffee, we're having it with a source of protein, carbs, and fat. But don't worry, I do still enjoy black coffee on occasion. I just make sure that I've eaten first and that I have my protein, carb, and fat sources right on this side, so it's not a shock to my system. I did make a video on pro-metabolic coffee ideas. In case you need a little bit of inspiration, I can link it here. Our next step, or our next tip, is going to be to always pair a protein, a carb, and a fat. Now I want to add a little caveat here, which is if you are eating mainly whole foods, which really is the idea behind this lifestyle, is that we're getting our nutrients from our food insofar as we are able, and we're eating foods that are really well sourced, really high quality. Usually you're going to see your fat coming with your protein. Think like milk, for instance, that's going to have both protein and fat in it, carbs as well, and a lot of meats are also going to have that fat as well. But if you're eating really lean meats, you might add something in. Total tangent, but all that goes to say, if we are eating carbs but not protein, we're going to see a blood sugar spike, but it's going to come crashing down. We're not going to have that consistent energy that we get when we add in the protein and the fat to kind of draw that out. And if we're just eating protein and fat, no carbohydrates, our body's not getting its preferred source of fuel. And while you might feel great at first, especially if you're doing something like keto, it's because you're running off cortisol. Your body is not getting what it needs to regulate your stress. Bottom line. Our next principle, and maybe I should have put this first because it's super important, is going to be to eat every 3 to 4 hours. Now this can vary from person to person, but especially if you're early on in your journey of supporting your metabolism, to keep your blood sugar consistent, we generally need to eat a protein, a carb, and a fat, at least some small amount every 3 to 4 hours. So making sure at least you're having a snack between lunch and dinner. I will leave that at that for the time being. And then my last tip is going to be to eat a bedtime snack, of course adhering to that same principle of balancing a protein, a carb, and a fat. That bedtime snack is going to help keep your blood sugar relatively or more so consistent as you sleep, bearing in mind that we do not need to extend our fasting time because you're already doing that during the time that you are asleep. Oftentimes, for people who are actually finding they're having trouble sleeping, waking up, blah, 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 if you simply eat a balanced bedtime snack, it's because of your blood sugar that you're waking up, and you can fix that problem. So I feel like that was a lot of just rambling all over the place trying to get all my thoughts out, but I hope this was helpful to you. I'm going to be filming a few more videos shortly on essentially my pro-metabolic journey, what I've seen to change in my life. And like I said at the beginning of the video, please leave a comment letting me know what you want to see. Whew, okay, I'm done.